Welcome to The Bunker. On The Bunker today, I have Silvie Lauder. Silvie is a journalist. She writes for a magazine called Respekt. And when she started there 16 years ago, she started in politics, covering that segment, including interviews with former President Václav Havel, who was the main guy here. The guy that they voted as the first president of Czechoslovakia back in '89 when the Iron Curtain came down. In recent years, Silvie has transitioned into becoming the face of feminism in the country. So she came on my podcast, told me her story, the status of feminism, Me Too, and a little bit about political corruption and such things. Enjoy. I almost forgot to talk about one of my main sponsors, the Old Bar. That's a little place, cozy place in Karlín in Prague, just off Krysikova. As the name kind of indicates, it sells oats, oatmeals, and some really healthy goodies made out of no nasty stuff. There is no white sugar, no white flour, none of this crap. And they have this amazing skyr. I'm Icelandic, and I love skyr. I've been eating it since I was a kid. And the Old Bar is the only place in Prague that has skyr by the Icelandic formula, made by an organic farm just outside of the city. You gotta try it out. You can either come there during the week, 8 to 3, or 8:30 to 3 it is, yes. 8:30 to 3, sorry. Or you can order on Wolt or Bolt. Get it sent to you. Check it out. You will not regret that. Silvie, welcome to The Bunker.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how do you like my bunker?
I like it very much. It's very padded and there are a lot of cushions around. And it's a sort of center of the town bunker.
Yes.
Elevated. We're not underground. We're sort of above the ground. So it's very original and unusual bunker.
Yeah, it's probably the first bunker in the world that's on the top floor.
Yeah.
When I was preparing for this, then I was spying on you a little bit on your social media, and I saw that last week you got into a fight in the metro.
Yes, I did.
Tell me a little bit about this.
I had to promise my boyfriend that it was the only fight that day, and the rest of the day I'm not going to fight anybody. So I followed that. I promised, and I did that. Well, what happened was I was just minding my own business, walking on the street in the center of Prague, and I saw a really big man. He was about 2 meters tall, sort of bumping violently into a very tiny woman on the street. And he sort of stomped on her feet and sort of really sort of bumped into her. And she obviously she was scared. She just didn't really see that coming because it was from behind. And instead of apologizing, he started to really shout at her. Horrible profanities.
That she had been his way? Or?
Yeah, he was, watch where you're going, you, and then I'm not going to repeat what he said.
But it's allowed to swear here as much as you want. But
okay.
Yeah.
But maybe when I talk about him, I will swear. And he really was shouting at her, and she was very tiny. I mean, I said it in the statement, she was Asian. And some people say, why is it important to say she was Asian? Because I just wrote it there because, as we all know, Asian people tend to be smaller than Europeans, and women especially. She was very tiny, and she had another woman with her, and also a small child. And all three got really scared. And I saw this incident, and you know the saying, when you see something, say something. And I believe it very much in terms of if it's somebody hurting someone smaller or weaker or doing something unacceptable in the public space. And I really don't like people ignoring such incidents. So first thing I did, I approached the woman and I apologized to her in English. They were foreigners. And she was really shocked, and I said, are you okay? And she said, yeah, fine. And I apologized. And then I followed him and I said, go back and apologize to this woman, because I said, this is unacceptable how you behaved, and you should go back and apologize. And he started to shouting at me, also in very nasty way. And he said, if you don't stop, I will punch you, he said. And I don't remember what I said. I say, well, you're an idiot. And he actually punched me. He punched me. He sort of punched me in the back and sort of in my arm. And that's where we come to the fight part. I said, well, this is not acceptable. I'm not going to get punched by this rude man. And I punched him back. I had a bag full of books. Fortunately, I had a second volume of War and Peace, which was, I think, very in style of the situation. And then I weighted, I put it on weight at home, and it's 635 grams. Oh. So, it's more than half a kilogram. And another 4 books, and I just punched him with the bag. And then he sort of started running away. And I wanted to call the police because he actually physically attacked me, but he sort of, started running, and he jumped into a tram and just disappeared. But I followed him, and I was very angry because
with War and Peace in your bag.
War and Peace in my bag. But why I was angry was that I see these incidents quite often. I don't know if it's somehow I'm somehow where I am. These incidents happen, but I can mention that in last couple of months, I saw a man really shouting at 2 elderly Ukrainian women that they should learn Czech and they should go back where the hell they came from. I saw also elderly man in his sort of 60s or early 70s doing sort of vulgar gesture at a girl who could be 20 at maximum. I saw a man shouting terrible profanities at an elderly lady that was crossing the road. I am so sorry. I hit exactly what I was told not to hit. She was crossing the road to get a tram, and she was in his way. He was in a car, and he sort of rolled the window down and shouted at her. She was in her late 70s. So I see these incidents.
Yeah, but this is every day here. I mean, the Good Samaritan doesn't live in the city in Prague, Yeah.
And one
except
of the things, you. There are more people like me. I'm not absolutely, but I don't like. What I don't like, apart from people who do this, is also people who ignore when this happens. I'm not saying you should be some kind of Superman kind of guy or Batman going around town and punishing,
with War and Peace.
Exactly, Yeah, I'm like a kind of like a lady superhero with like a nerdy superhero with books in her bag. They could be actually good, comic book. Yeah. Okay, I'll do this. But I don't like when this is ignored, because I think what it means is these people go through life believing that it's okay to behave like this. And it's okay to kick people and punch people and yell at tiny women. And I find it absolutely unacceptable. And so that's what I did. Unfortunately, I didn't call the police. And of course, putting his pictures, however blurred, on the social media is, of course, questionable. And I don't only mean by the GDPR standards, or some people had a problem with me sort of, being the snitch, going publicly. But I feel like he should be punished in some way for his behavior. And so I choose this way. And of course, I will, if police think that I crossed the law and will fine me for, publishing his pictures, I'm fine with it.
We'll visit you in jail.
Thank you.
But anyway, so I just found this interesting because I was thinking because you have kind of been on the forefront of feminism here for the past few years in the Czech Republic, and when I saw this, I thought, okay, the guy really picked the wrong person to mess with. But it had an okay ending, let's say. I mean, it's a bad incident, and unfortunately, I can agree with you. I see those incidents as well. But so you're currently a journalist at a magazine called Respekt.
Yes, I am.
Or
currently
Respekt.
Respekt.
And you've been there for.
Currently means 16 years.
Yes.
Yeah. It's quite a long time.
Yeah, but where are you from? Where did it all start?
Mm-hmm. This is funny because very often people assume, because of my name, especially my surname, that I am a foreigner, because I don't have a typical first name that would be Czech. I have a sort of an international first name. So sometimes people are surprised by my roots, but I am a girl from southern Moravia. I am actually a country girl. I was, which is quite funny that I realized it, that I actually was born into a house with no plumbing and no running water in the late 70s. It was very, it's like story from some like Dickens or something. But I was growing up partly in a very tiny village in southern Moravia. Tiny village means 300 people in this very, very old house, like a farmhouse, and partly in Brno, which is the second largest town in the Czech Republic. So it was a sort of split growing up. But my roots are in this village. Both of my parents are from this village. So I am a country girl.
Yeah, but just to make it clear, no running water, no heating. This is just the past.
There was a heating.
Last century.
Yeah. There was a heating, but you had to collect the coal, and there was a sort of old-fashioned
in the
for
basement.
wood, and absolutely. So, and we had animals, and we had rabbits and chickens and all that. So I have a very sort of humble roots, so to speak.
And how was it? Are you from a big family or?
Originally, my family was very small. Actually, the family unit only consisted of 3 people, me, my mother, and my grandmother, her mother. My mother didn't have any siblings, so they were really... And my grandfather from my mother's side was already dead when I was born. And there was actually a funny story that I was born on the same day and same hour 6 years after my grandfather died. It was actually the same day and month and the same hour. And my mother claimed that I look like him, and I'm very much sort of copy of him. So I'm actually my reincarnated grandfather. So that's a good that's a good part of my story. No, but and then my father married my mother when I was 7. So then he joined us in living in and my father has a large family, had a lot of brothers and sisters, and they have a lot of children, so a lot of cousins. So
from the region there, or
yes, they are all from either the village or the villages around. They really didn't move far away from this village, and very much they just were happy there. They didn't really want to explore the world, and they lived there.
Village people.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't sound, condescending.
No, but I think,
truly,
for
happy
me, as an Icelander, that's not a condescending word. But I've heard that here that it's not necessarily something that you want to hear. But
it could be, and also you should be careful if you're big town sort of intellectual, not to sound like you think that all these people are basically like eating grass and I don't know, so absolutely that's not what I'm saying. They were just people who were happy with their lives there, and they didn't really want to change something about their lives. Yeah.
And what about like your childhood? I mean, were you playing with other kids or siblings, or I mean, what was the young Silvie?
I was actually I have a half brother, but he's quite older, so I didn't really play with him. And but I did have a lot of friends in the village and some friends in Brno, and I think later we'll come to talk about that, but I think what's really interesting about my childhood, and I realize it more and more now when I'm an adult, that I was really a mixture of girly girl and sort of a boyish girl. And so I like to explore sort of both worlds. And I was a typical girl in the sense that I was a little ballet dancer. I loved ballet. I was absolutely obsessed with it. I had all sorts of books, and I was training, and I was performing in a theater, and I had a pink tutu and all that. I loved horses, I loved just dancing. I loved all sorts of girly stuff. But at the same time, I really enjoyed the boyish stuff, especially sort of when you stay in the village. So riding the bike, climbing the trees, exploring the woods, all that, just playing with rocks and like building little sort of shacks you can hide inside from bushes and all that. And I really, really enjoyed that as well. And from early on, I saw that you don't necessarily have to fit in some narrow boxes of what society tells you a proper girl should do or a proper boy should do. You can do both things and be girl at the same time, but at the same time you can be you can just enjoy the stuff that typically maybe boys enjoy more. And also I think which was great, that when I lived partly in the village and partly in a big town, that I enjoyed the part of my childhood and growing up just in the village, which maybe kids from big towns don't enjoy as much. And this is exactly it. Riding the bike and just being free and, you know, just going and just pick up some cherries, probably steal from someone. Or actually not steal from someone, because it was the 80s. The private ownership didn't exist then. So probably steal from the state. And just, you know, being coming home at 9 o'clock in the evening, completely just tired from all day running around outside. And I think that was absolutely fantastic about my childhood, and I have great memories about that.
And is that like, so you're kind of both pink and punk?
I absolutely love that pink and punk, and I'm going to use it, and I'm going to credit you for coming with it.
Great.
Or did you steal it from someone?
No, I made it up. But how, because I guess like at this time, as you say, I mean, this kind of or during communism still, I mean, the Iron Curtain comes down in 89, and around that time you're kind of 10-ish. What about the role of girls then? You know, like how was that? Like, were parents or families trying to push girls into more, let's say, more traditional female things, like you're saying, the ballet, etc., etc., or was it okay to play with? In your family, was it fine that you were biking with the boys? You know, or
maybe it was fine to bike with the boys, but at the same time, I heard, especially from the larger family I talked about, which was the village people, but maybe with the very actually conservative view of the world, or maybe tradition. I don't like traditional, because then we have to argue what is tradition, which tradition, what part of tradition, but conservative view of the world. And I learned very early on that what is expected from girls is obedience, especially. I mean, of course, from boys too, to a certain extent, but I could see that there was a stronger and bigger tolerance towards boys sort of being boys, you know, how it's the saying, being wild and being, you know, doing something wrong and not really care about school and just, you know, biking around and being cheeky and all that. But it was significantly less tolerance if girl did it, because girl should be a nice girl which sits down and, you know, focuses on her school and has a nice little dress and is nice to everyone and doesn't really talk back and is not really wild. And I can see that very early on that this was an issue. And then later on, of course, as a child, I mean, no wonder I became a journalist, because very early on I was very much interested in what the grown-ups are saying. So I sometimes just sit around the grown-up conversations and was just listening to what they were talking about. Of course, I had no idea what it meant, half of the stuff, more even. But very early on I noticed that there is the discussions are about certain women in the village, for instance, that she is not a proper woman because she doesn't cook a dinner every day, or that one is not a proper woman because her lunch was late and she didn't have 3 courses or whatever, or that one, and very harsh comments about especially women, but also men. You know, he's not a proper man because he's interested in, I don't know what now, you know, something that was considered
sewing or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Something that was not considered manly and appropriate for men. And, or he didn't really, even, you know, of course, even the men, but of course I focused more on what I experienced as a girl, but also on men. He wanted to go to study and be a doctor of philosophy. That's not a proper job. How is he going to provide for his wife and kids? Well, I don't know. He doesn't need to have a wife. He could study Kant for 10 more years, and maybe then, you know, just let people be whoever they want to be, you know.
And you didn't feel that was possible back then?
I don't really know what actually I can't remember. I rebelled against it, definitely. I'm not sure
old?
if well, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, I have a great story, which caused, it has nothing to do with feminism, but I think it maybe showed some parts of my character early on, that it was still a communism when I was 7. And in the village, there was this like a farm association, which was state-owned, and it incorporated all the fields. By the way, my family's fields, which was stolen from my family by the communists. The field was part of this organization, and they provided lunches. And when I was during summer living with my grandmother in the farmhouse, I would always every day I would go to this farm organization and collect a lunch for us in these like boxes and go home, and we would eat it as a lunch. And I didn't like how the lunches tasted. So one day I decided, there was this book, you can actually write your opinions, and I decided to express my opinions, and I wrote in there, I don't like your lunches. And I
the
had
first Google review.
Yes, absolutely. Yelp or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And I wrote it there, and then I signed it. And it was a huge scandal in the village, because at the time, people didn't criticize state-owned organizations, or, they didn't call the restaurants and say, this is horrible what you're cooking. And they didn't really understand, who did it. And then they thought the writing style was sort of shaky. So they thought it was some elderly lady, because half of the village had the same surname, of course. So there was this investigating, and when it turned out 7-year-old girl wrote it, I think my mother was told that she should really take better care of me, because I'm too opinionated and it's not appropriate for such a young child to be expressing some opinions if something is good or bad. So I was strong-headed. So I probably didn't. I don't think I believed it's impossible to be different, but maybe I just felt that it's going to be that I have to sort of push against it.
But then you go to school, and what did you know that you wanted to be a journalist, or was that like an automated?
I didn't. Even when I look back, it was so obvious. I mean, I was always interested in what was going on, Even when I was really like a nerd. For instance, my birthday is tomorrow, but I'm not bringing it up just to, talk about my birthday. But I do remember in 88, when I was 10, Gorbachev and Reagan signed some treaty about missiles. And I remember watching it on the news and saying, this is actually quite interesting. It's on my birthday, so it's an important day. I don't know, it's just silly. But I was interested in what's going on. And then later on, I realized that this job combines some passions of mine, and that's reading and writing. Reading, I was just a bookworm from the day I started to read. I was just obsessed with books. But also later on I realized I enjoy writing. So in like elementary school, all the boys who later became engineers and were building bridges absolutely hated writing essays. They absolutely hated, because yes, of course, they were then later building bridges, but they loved it. And then another passion of mine was traveling and talking to people and seeing what's happening. And journalism is many things to many people, and it has various forms, but ultimately it provides you opportunity to visit some worlds other people wouldn't necessarily visit. And I don't only mean, meeting some celebrity or politician, but you do see behind the scenes. And again, not only just politics, that you go to parliament on a daily basis, or you travel with the Prime Minister to America, as I did several years ago, and you go to Congress and you see the bust of Václav Havel unveiled, and it's amazing, and there's Madeleine Albright, and it's amazing moment. But also even things like, I don't know, you write about some piano industry, and you visit Petrov, the factory that creates these amazing pianos, and you just go there and see how people make something. Or you talk to interesting people, you visit them in their offices, you visit them in their homes, by the way, now, because we couldn't meet in cafes. So a few weeks ago, I wrote this article about our first lady, and one historian really helped me with the books, and I couldn't visit her in her office because it was closed. So I visited in her home. I saw her amazing bookshelf full of amazing books. So you see the world in its richness and in its interesting ways, and I always was very curious about things, and I wanted to see the world, and the journalism provides it to you.
But did you know it back then that would
didn't.
be the journalism?
No, I absolutely didn't. I wanted to be a ballet dancer.
Uh-huh.
I was serious about ballet, but then I tried to apply for the school for professional ballet dancers. You apply when you're about 12 or 11. And immediately when I came in, I knew this dream was not going to happen because I was bigger than the girls there. And you have to be absolutely tiny because you are lifted a lot, and you can't really ask a man to lift someone who's I'm not going to say how many kilograms, but and I had boobs, and I was 12 and I had boobs, and my boobs were bigger than the people in the commission picking the future ballet dancer. So no, that was not. And then I wanted to be an actress, which again a very short period of time. Then I was interested in art, so I thought I would be a curator in a gallery, and my dream, of course, was I was going to be looking at Cézannes in Paris. Well, obviously that's not going to happen. And then all of a sudden I just somehow realized that reading, writing, exploring the world is journalism. So I ended up being a journalist. Yeah.
But you studied that at university here in Prague,
Charles University.
That's one of the oldest universities in the world, right?
It absolutely is, and I studied only for 3 years there. I always, recently I wrote about Czech universities, and I spoke with people from Oxford and all sorts of places with doctors and so on. I say, yeah, but so you also have university education? I say, yeah, I do. I'm a bachelor. No, but that's a joke, I don't really have, and I don't even believe in that you need a formal education as a journalist.
Oh.
I mean, you learn something, absolutely. You meet interesting people, you try it out, but you either have what it takes, and that's quite a lot, or you don't, and no school changes that. You just, and then I always say that my university is Respekt, because they're amazing editors who are so tough on you that you want to quit so many times, because it's just you write the article 3 times.
But you like that. You like this. You like to fight. you like to fight.
Well,
right?
I sort of like it and don't like it at the same time. But I do like the fact that it makes me a better, creates a better work. At the end, of course, you hate the person. It's like, it's your child. You work on the article. It's like somebody will tell you your child is ugly, and it's not perfect. It's like, okay, so there's the problem, and you go back and you make it better, and it's going to be better. So you just you have to swallow your pride, which, by the way, all journalists should learn how to do, because journalism is a lot about egos, and I'm absolutely no exception. Of course, it's nice to see your name there or being, awarded and so on. But you should be humble and you should take advice. So absolutely, I'm saying that my real education is Respekt.
But you during this time, like, so I mean, you move alone to Prague. So you're on your own feet, basically.
Yeah.
As of
19, 20.
And so I guess you had some jobs.
I did.
Long and
Yes.
like any particular shitty ones, or
so many other jobs. I worked in a pasta factory, which I was basically standing 12 hours overlooking this sort of shaky kind of like a river of pasta, and I was the person making sure that the spaghetti went left and the other kind went right, and if it didn't, I had to pick up the thing and throw it on the other side, and it was in horrible sort of dust and horrible noise. Another time I had a job when I was creating these, how when at the hairdresser I have the color on the hair, and you have these sort of, you look how it looks. So what we were doing, we were gluing these pieces of hair with the color into these sort of like a paper
booklets,
books,
yeah.
And we were high at the end of the.
From the glue.
Yeah, there could be a benefit of this job. We were kind of high from the glue, and I don't know what's wrong with me, but glue seemed to be a sort of a repeating topic. That one of my favorite odd jobs was that I was a walking glue tube. It was like a giant tube of glue, and it was actually, this wasn't in Prague. It was still in Brno when I was at high school. And there were these sort of like affairs. I mean, it's now almost dead, it doesn't happen anymore. But this was always several days. It was a certain industry. And there was this glue company which wanted to promote their product. So the typical way you hire a bunch of 17-year-old girls, you dress them as a glue, and you just send them to walk around this space. And it was so much fun because, of course, everybody loved it.
Yeah.
People took pictures with us. So also the company was happy because we were all over the place.
The news, yeah.
And they were giving us food, and it was a fantastic job. So that was fun. But then I was an English teacher. I worked at the supermarket. I was, all sorts of stuff. But what's funny is that I realized the generational gap between me and maybe my younger colleagues now in Respekt, who are sort of late 20s, early 30s, how they all know how to make amazing coffee. They really understand coffee. And I'm thinking, why is that? What's the difference? And the difference was when I was in that age, we didn't really have these jobs in Starbucks, or I probably shouldn't name any concrete companies, but we didn't really do this. We just did these shitty jobs in supermarkets and pasta factories and being a tube of glue. But I think it's good to have these jobs. I think all people, even if you're ultimately you become a lawyer or someone with this kind of job, you should see what it is to have this job which doesn't really pay well, which is not fulfilling intellectually whatsoever. Of course, some people don't need it. Some people prefer when it's. Oh no, I'm not sure if they prefer it, but I'm not saying that everyone has the same preference in what the job should be. But yeah, you should just try all sorts of things to maybe appreciate your job than you ultimately end up in.
Yeah, it can be a good motivator that you try something out, and you find out that this is not what I want to do, and then it kind of pushes you maybe to educate or seek something better. And talking about jobs, just one of the sponsors of the show is called Alfred.cz, where people can actually find new jobs. So if anyone is listening that has a shitty job or wants to change jobs, they can do it there.
Yeah. Well, when people stop reading newspaper, I will definitely give you a call, and I'm afraid that could happen sometime in the future if people stop reading us. But I hope But
they will listen to podcast. You will just have your own podcast.
I will have a podcast.
But then, you kind of pretty young when you get into kind of serious journalism, and you're writing primarily when you get to Respekt, you're writing primarily about politics, right? And one thing that I've always been curious about since, I've lived here in the Czech Republic in Prague for 11 years, and one of the first things I heard when I came here was about some of the corruption that goes on here, both in like bigger scale and also in some of the smaller scale when it comes to like permissions and public offices and stuff like this. And I was always so curious and always wanted to find someone to ask about this. How can this survive in a community that is not bigger than what we have? We're talking about a nation of 11.5 million people or roughly around that. And everybody knows that it's there. Is it accepted? Or what's how can corruption, political corruption exist here?
So it's a very wide question, and I'm thinking where should I start? But maybe I'll start with sort of a positive note. That what we see lately are a lot of cases of corruption uncovered, actually. So firstly, I would start with, let's not forget that there is a former Minister of Health actually sitting in jail at the moment in one of the biggest corruption cases in the latest year, and which was uncovered by the police, and it was a very wide web of politicians and their friends, sucking the state dry. At the same time, actually, there is another huge case in Brno, where I come from, where there was another high-ranking politician involved, and again, it's an organized group, and it was going on some time. Then we have many cases regarding the EU funds. which of course they're like, they're like the golden, what's the saying in English, it's like the thing that you have in front of you, and of course it's a target for people who want easy money to basically steal. I mean, I always say it's stealing. If you don't use public money for its purpose, or you cheat, then you're stealing our money because we are the providers of the money, or you steal money of other EU citizens if it's about EU funds. So that's on the lighter note, or the more positive note. So there are some cases uncovered. There were some more focus on it from the police, from the prosecutors, and also general public. And also another interesting thing I would point out is how much energy was also put into the conflict of interest of the prime minister. So, for instance, the Transparency International organization was the one taking all sorts of steps pointing to the conflict of interest he's in, which again, ultimately it means that you are influencing. It's not corruption per se, but like in a classical definition, but you can influence public money to make your own companies profit, and that's just ultimately wrong. So we see a lot of, but to answer your question, I don't want to be the one to blame everything on communism, of course not, but there is a certain. What we saw especially in the later years, was very widely accepted notion that it's a saying, it's a popular saying: who doesn't steal steals from his family. In other words, if you don't steal from the state, and again, as I said, there was no private ownership, so everything was owned by the state, therefore by no one. People didn't understand that it was all ours. If you don't steal, you steal from your family. So it was so massive. People were actually stealing. One of my friends it's funny, but at the same time it's horrible. One of my friends had the story that when her father was working in this factory, in some company in the 80s, he actually stole a chainsaw from the company. And the method there, especially in this company and the factory was in the town, was that people would go to this fence which was around the factory and sort of throw it against, and then later after the work they collect it from the outside of the venue. And the story with the chainsaw was he threw the chainsaw and then he tried to collect it, he couldn't find it, and the problem was the chainsaw was sort of stuck in the tree, so he had to climb up of the tree to collect this chainsaw that didn't belong to him. He stole it from the company he worked for, so he could use it at home. And I think this is deeply rooted. And again, of course, it doesn't explain everything. It's 30 years since the end of the communism, and definitely part of it was that police didn't act, the prosecutors didn't act. Then there was a huge topic of police and prosecutors being directly influenced by politicians. So their inaction wasn't a coincidence. It was a direct consequence of ties, and there were some cases where politicians were trying to influence the investigation and the prosecution. So it's sort of like so it's intertwined. It's cultural thing from the past, then problems with the weak state that doesn't function the way it should be. Political parties not punishing enough some politicians and that changed also. Now the people flies out of the party immediately. I mean, you do see the changes in the culture. The ones only that there is just suspicion, then there is some action. And also there was this several elections where we even wrote it in Respekt, where people who were actually mostly in link with some very dodgy cases and there was some suspicion of corruption or other things, were not elected to parliament or to regional governments. That actually people have spoken. People directly, because you have this system when you can sort of change the list of people who are elected, and through this system many politicians were changes. So I do see it, and one last thing, what we see in Slovakia these days. A huge scandal where they realized that the former police chief was in contact with some criminals, judges and all that. And we discussed it actually today in the office or on our Google Meet meeting. If is it in Czech Republic because is it as bad as in Slovakia and we don't know it? Or is it better than there? And we don't know it because it doesn't happen. And I tend to go with the latter one, that it's not as bad in Slovakia, that that there's some good police work and some brave, by the way, female prosecutors who are really tough and are focused on these cases. So I think it's changing to, be better.
And it kind of, I mean, I wanted to put the main focus of this into the feminism that we're going to come to later because you kind of transitioned there. But I'm just curious about what I was surprised also when I started living here was that kind of the inactivity of the public in politics in a way that people would say openly, "Oh, I don't want to go even and vote because it doesn't really make any difference." Is that the same now? I mean, or has it changed, or do you see more activity with younger people? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one last thing I wanted to say regarding corruption and that's directly linked to the inactivity is that sometimes it's difficult to find a whistleblower who would, actually point out these things. And I think it's significant that we don't even have a Czech name for this. We just use the word whistleblower, the English word, because we don't have and it has this kind of like a negative connotation that you snitch to the police about your colleagues in some firm and so on. But at the same time, when we look at these important cases I mentioned, for instance, the former health minister, David Rath, there was some brave people who actually reported what was happening, and then there were important witnesses. So that also had some brave people there. But I would absolutely agree with the fact that it's changing with young people, that they're getting more and more involved, and that civic society is driven mainly by them. Because when you look at some projects, you really can admire people, educated kids about various things, helping senior citizens, and even, organizing protests against the government. If you let's remind us that the biggest protests since '89 were organized by a guy who was 23 at the time, 24. And so absolutely, and of course there are always these complaints that the young ones don't care about, they just care about Facebook or whatever. And I always say to people who say, "Oh, and what did you do when you were 20 in the 80s or in the 90s or even in the noughties? Like, what did you do to be active? Were you in And very often they say, we couldn't. I said, well, you could, but you just didn't. So stop complaining about young people. And so I see, and it's not only about politics, but it's also about, there was this, maybe you should also interview her. She's also great when you talk about feminism. Just to mention one girl, Johanna Nejedlova, she's called Johanna Nejedlova. She founded this organization called Consent, and she just received some award from this American bitch magazine, which is a great name. She's the bitch of the year. One of the bitches of the year she is. And what they do, for instance, now they educate the general public about sexual assault, what consent is and so on. And they do important stuff now. They have the series of workshops and they educate kids about, sex. And it's so important because the state doesn't care about that, and we don't really know how much it's actually covered in schools, and if it is, it's only about HIV and scaring kids, and they do it so greatly. I saw several of their workshops, and she is 29, and she just receives these awards wherever she goes because she's really visible and successful in this. That's just one example. There's so many more people doing amazing jobs. So,
but it's interesting because this is kind of the feeling that I have here, that there are kind of two nations living here. There are dinosaurs like us that still manage.
Am I also a dinosaur?
We are born at a time where things were different, let's say.
Yeah, and we're the analog kids.
Yeah,
that's the gap.
But we have somehow managed, I want to believe, just to clap myself a little bit on the back, that I want to believe that we've kind of managed to leave at least one food with the younger people
Yeah.
and kind of being able to relate somehow to what they do, or at least not categorically deny it as bullshit. And then you have the older people that have kind of, let's say, half or even 70% of their education and upbringing under communism, and they have a different mindset. So I see this, what you're saying, and it's interesting. And yeah, it's actually interesting how you have managed to kind of, you play both, you know, you can, you know, both sides of the table. But as a political journalist, I mean, I guess you interviewed a lot of interesting people, and I know that you interviewed the Václav Havel, who was the first president after the fall of the communism.
Yes.
And that guy is like, he is kind of the guy here. I mean, there are people probably with a tattoo of his face on them and stuff like that.
That's an interesting. I'm not sure if there is someone with a tattoo of his face, but that would be interesting to find out. But maybe there is at least one person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's like an icon here.
Absolutely.
And you interviewed him.
Yeah.
When was that, and how was that?
It's a long time ago, actually. I mean, he's now also dead for several years, but I think it was 2005 or 6. Oh my God, I don't remember when I interviewed Václav Havel. That's a mistake. But no, it was a highlight of my career. Absolutely, one of the highlights. I mean, I think I interviewed many, many great people. But he was really important. And again, as I get older and hopefully more educated and I understand more some things which are important in the society, I understand more and more how crucial he was in the transition. And I just give you one example of that. It's not really, discussed so much, but basically in the early 90s, there was this great clash between Havel and Václav Klaus, who later replaced him as a president, about what is the most important element in the transition from communism to free society. Klaus said it was the economy. He said, first economy, first we have to recover from that, and then we can build up the civic society. And Havel said, no, you cannot have first economy. You first have to sort of put these bricks of stable civic society in place, and then you can start reforming, the companies or whatever, or at the same time do it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very obsessed with the idea of constitutional court and how it should look. And, people say, why is it some constitutional court? Why is it important? And some bunch of old guys, sitting somewhere deciding whatever. Not nobody think it was important. Of course, many people thought it was important. But I didn't understand for many years why it was important that he actually, kept focus on building a strong, independent constitutional court. And now I see it. Now I see how the court, it's similar as in United States, of course. I mean, it's not the same, but the court it is a sort of like an insurance of
it's an emergency brake.
Yeah, like an emergency brake.
Yeah.
Bad law, some weird changes of voting system which happened in the late 90s. Constitutional court stopped it. Also, in many cases of the cultural sort of norms and so on, they paved the way towards, let's say, more civilized sort of countries. And Havel absolutely perfectly understood that. The same goes for our membership in North Atlantic Alliance and European Union, that his sort of reputation he had worldwide and some connections and so on. And also in the case of NATO, Madeleine Albright, who's of Czech origin, helped to somehow negotiate it as joining these organizations. But again, people didn't really understand how important it was to put us sort of safely in some organizations that would protect us. And maybe he saw that the end of communism, it's not the end of the history.
No.
It's not the
Especially
end.
it was not a bloody revolution. Nobody was killed.
Yeah.
The people were all still somewhere.
So there. And by the way, and they're now coming back, and they're very happy to tell you that, you know, you had your time, and then it's our time again. You know, very, very, very many of them. And part of the discussion is that that the Havel's name is being, you know, just dipped into mud, and he was the worst president and all that, and it's part of the sort of the changing. The changing atmosphere in the society. But as I said, I even, as I get older, as I more understand certain things, that I appreciate him more for what he foreseen and what he stand for. And just one last thing I want to say about him is that with him, that sometimes lately, you know, especially with Trump and all the populists and so on, it feels like being decent and being nice to people and saying things like, you know, you shouldn't lie and you should fulfill your promises, and it's laughed at. It's laughable. You know, it's weak people. Weak people are nice. Being nice is not, you know, yeah. And all these sort of values quite often are laughed at. And when you read Havel, you see that he was right. It's not laughable. It's what you feel like it's important. It's what you stand for, and that's what he said. He said, "Being decent to people is not weakness." And there's so many quotes I can use, but one of them I love especially, and I will just mention this one. And I'm sure I will misquote him, but he said something like, "Hope is when you do something, regardless if it will succeed or not, and you just do it because you think it's important. You don't do it because it will gain you something. It will gain you money or fame or whatever, success, professional success, but you do it for the thing itself, and you do it because you think it's important." And again, you can laugh at it, or you can just say, well, he was a dreamer. But at the same time, if you stand by these principles, then it ultimately makes you, a decent human, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I think that in some way, these words like populism and so on, they are in some way just a result of what society has become, because we are very egoistic right now. We want instant results of everything we do. Everything happens very fast. Everything is available. Everyone should be, and there is a sense of entitlement. And now we're talking about, you know, Europe and America, and I think in some way that maybe that has contributed to the fact that people are now saying that, oh, he was just a dreamer or something, because right now people don't want hope, they want the results. And we are always expecting, you know, we can get our food at the door in 20 minutes, and if it's 25 minutes, I'm pissed off. And back when he was around, you know, and kind of preaching his messages, then it was a different society. So I don't know, I mean, I've thought a lot about this populism, because what should a politician do other than satisfy the public? That's that these are his bosses.
But at the same time, they should not only satisfy the public, they should have a greater picture in mind, and they should be responsible for other things, just, you know, answering to immediate needs of the people. But just very shortly with Havel, I think he would be happy with the young people we talked about just a few minutes ago, which are doing exactly that. They're doing it because it's important for them. They're not gaining any, you know, definitely no money. They are doing it in their free time. There are all sorts of projects which are focused on social work and helping disadvantaged kids and elderly and all that. So, yeah, I think we do see, as you mentioned, we see two societies, or even, you know, it's more maybe layers.
Yeah.
But in a way that it was fulfilled, certain vision he had about the society. In part of the society, definitely it was fulfilled. So, yeah.
So but then I mean, I know we could sit and talk about your political writing and all this stuff for ages. I just kind of wanted to, bring out some of the highlights. But you transition over to feminism. Was that like a conscious move, or was it I don't know? Was it a coincidence or?
Well, I sort of transitioned and didn't transition. I would say that maybe I sort of widened my interests, because I did start writing mainly about politics. And then when I talked about exploring the world, I, as you as a journalist look into different kind of things. I also started to write about something else, some other stuff that's happening in the society. I started to be interested in these sort of soft stories, not only the hard news. And slowly I realized I'm passionately interested in these stories. We can categorize as feministic. But I didn't start as saying like, now I'm a feminist and I'm going to write about this and this and this. I just sort of started covering these topics, and this led to, because you write about infertility, and then you write about people who don't have kids, and then you write about people who have 7 kids, and then you write about people who have kids later in life, and it sort of snowballs, and it goes from one to another. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden I wake up one day and then I realized I'm covering basic feministic topics, but it's sort of it was a slow sort of movement. It wasn't like one day I decided certain things. And maybe also it was just influenced by the fact that I did write about domestic politics. And there are some topics discussed in the parliament. There were huge discussion in the late 90s, early noughties about domestic violence, for instance. So I covered that. Then there was a huge discussion about stalking being a crime. There was a huge fight. Then there was a great discussion about maternity leave, paternity leave possible, all that. And if you just simply follow domestic politics, you see these topics, and I suddenly realized I'm really interested in these topics. So I focused on them more and more, and slowly over time, I started to really focus on them. But also I still write about all sorts of other things. I don't only focus on this. I write about history, also still about politics, and various other topics.
But you have somehow still, like, as far as I can see, you're kind of the poster girl for feminism here right now.
Am I?
Yeah,
probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if
several people. Many people.
But everybody that I spoke to and said, "Oh, I'm going to meet with Silvie," and the feminist. So they knew that. So
I am the feminist now. I can't change it now.
For the purpose of this podcast, you're the feminist. But where is feminism at here? If you kind of compare it to the neighboring countries, or let's say Northern Europe, or whatever are the kind of the role models. Where do we stand here?
Yeah, that's a very, very complex question. So the one point really definitely that's necessary to say is it's extremely unpopular. It's very unpopular. And
by whom?
A lot of people, but also by the agenda setters and the role models. And I can give you a concrete example. There is this media archive we use as a journalist, and you can search in media articles and interviews and all sorts. And I recently tried to search for a phrase, "I'm not a feminist, but," specifically this phrase. It turned out hundreds of thousands of results. So many people, actresses, even scientists, and politicians, all sorts of women, especially, when they say, "I'm not a feminist, but," and then they come up with various claims and opinions and views that are absolutely feministic, but they feel the need to distance themselves from the word because they know people will just not react well to it. They will think that they're all sorts of things, ugly, man-hating, hairy, aggressive, everything, And it's actually true. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but I've heard it so many times that if I would receive like a 1 crown every time I hear a cliche about feminists, I would. I mean, I wouldn't be a millionaire, but I would be able to buy myself a nice pair of shoes or a nice coat for winter. So the general, and it's not only, as I said, the agenda setters. I think this is really important because, of course, in many countries, I'm sure in Iceland, there are some people who say that feminists are, crazy women, and or in Sweden, or in all these countries, But at the same time, you have either the whole political scene or important part of the political scene, and maybe some artists or some, visible people openly saying they support certain feministic views, and that they think it's an important, however flawed, view of certain topics, and that there are some questions that still need to be discussed. I mean, my favorite picture is Barack Obama in a T-shirt saying "I'm a feminist." I mean, so this guy who he said it when he was a president. He said he was a feminist, and then he explained why. And in the Czech Republic, unfortunately, the problem is that you don't have many politicians who would say this, actually the opposite. So the worst cliches about feminism are supported by the prime minister, the president, the important politicians, filmmakers, singers, people who are visible, who maybe shape the popular opinions. And they're very, very vocal about that. And so I think this is important. And now, of course, we can discuss why is that. I mean, of course, some of the reasons are common with the other countries. But I think what's specific about Czech Republic is that many people believe that communists were actually feminists. Many people think that what communists try to do when sort of quote-unquote liberated women, which communists claim they liberated women, was feminism. And therefore, if you're a feminist, you're a communist. I mean, I've heard it so many times, I'm a feminist. Simply, you're like those communists. You want to force people into something that is unnatural. And that is simply not true, because communists did introduce their form of something they called liberating the women, but they, in absolutely no sense of the word, liberated the women. What they did was, simply put, I don't want to speak for 10 minutes about all sorts of history. The thing is, they did some changes. For instance, they reformed the family law, which they reformed in 1949, and they reformed a law which was from 1811. So in 1949, this country still had a law from 1811 which said various things, that a man is the head of the family and only he decides what happens to the children, where does the family live, if the woman works or doesn't work, all sorts of things. And it was very much some sort of like a guidance to the family life, which was set in law. And communists changed this, and they sort of really, really, changed it a lot. So, for instance, they did this, or their abortion politics, so they were, and women worked a lot, really started to work. But if you really look into it in detail, it wasn't about personal choices. It wasn't about liberation. It wasn't about women. One theory says that it was important for communists that women work because they were simply missing 3 million Germans that were shifted away from the country. So you simply needed the workforce. So you said, everyone is equal, women should work, and it was mandatory to work. But they didn't do anything about who's looking after the home, or who's looking after the children, or if the women are paid well, or if they're harassed. And they didn't care about domestic violence, they didn't care about sexual violence, they didn't care about if women had the burden on themselves, which they did. So in the Czech popular culture, we say, generally people say that during communism, women had 2 of 3 jobs. So they had to work, but at the same time, it was 100% on them, childcare and domestic chores. And so, combination of all these things, so people saw people accepted that this is the liberation of women that also feminism provides, and they say they don't want it. So the problem is that there's some historical views which are not correct and very that confused. There are some misconceptions about what feminism actually is. Very often when people say, "Oh, I absolutely don't agree with feminism," and I always say, "Which one? Which one do you don't agree with?" And they look at you and say, "What do you mean?" I say, "Which feminism?" And they don't, they're not even aware it's not like a monolith. It's not a group of people that absolutely agrees with each other. But what I think is also another thing where we mentioned about the Czech society is also, if you look into history, all these, all the laws which we could say there were some kind of feminism steps, including right to vote and all sorts of things, were never product of people fighting from below up. It was always some
Top
kind
down.
of visionary up down.
Yeah.
So, for instance, in Iceland, I'm so sorry, I keep hitting it. I have to put my hands down. So, for instance, in Iceland, that famous strike of women, that would never happen here because women would be too embarrassed or they would think that men would just think that they're crazy for doing it, and they would never do that, never did it. And all these changes were actually product of some politicians or some visionaries who thought...
It was not a movement of the people that created it. But just because basically what you're saying is that people are they kind of associate feminism with communism, and therefore by default you should deny it because communism has a bad name here for obvious reasons.
And also people lived through those times as women and men, and their experiences from how it worked then, they were unhappy. So they associate those times with, okay, this is how, when feminists are actually ruling, this is what it would look like.
Yeah.
And we were unhappy, or my father and mother were unhappy, some people say, or my grandmother was unhappy, so I don't want this. I don't want to live like this. So I think it works like, it goes like this.
But what are kind of like, okay, so what are the main topics here? Is it like equal pay, or is it, I know, for example, one thing that I found very interesting here, and I remember this. I had this company here when I came, and our finance director was a very talented woman, and she had studied for 5 years some finance, and she was very good. And she came one day into my office and said, "Okay, I'm going to go on maternity leave." And I was like, "Okay, so I'll see you next year."
See you next year. Yeah. Oh
And
no, she said no. See you in 6 years.
Yeah,
if she
actually
has 2
said
kids.
3. Yes, she said see you in 3 years, but I'll probably have another kid, so I might see you in 6 or 7 years. And I was like, okay. And I in my naiveness, I asked her, "So why did you go to school?" And because she explained me that, okay, I need to stay at home because there is no system for my kids to go into. I can't even put them to kindergarten unless I pay an arm and a leg for it, etc., etc. And then I realized, okay, wow, this really disturbs the balance here because it empowers the men at the cost of the women, because you kind of, and then the maternity leave pay here is really shitty. It's not even, you can't even buy a beer for it. So then I thought, this is very skewed. Are there many examples of this in the system here or in the society where you can say that women are at the wrong end of the stick?
I think you absolutely perfectly took out the one important topic that influenced everything from pay gap to poverty of women to even violence in some cases, because the balance of powers, absolutely, the dependency, that when the men, no, of course not all men, but in some pathological relationships, when the man knows that the wife is completely dependent on him, he expects her to be completely obedient because he is the provider, and if she's not, he's unhappy and therefore can, do certain things, again, in the pathological relationship. So this influences everything, and it even influences, by this I mean the idea, who cares for the children and for how long and how it looks like. I think this influences everything. And it influences even young girls before they have kids. So I recently interviewed a lawyer who came up with this idea after she talked to her friend who is a young doctor, female doctor. And she just said, "Oh, I hate it in the hospital because they just ask me, oh, are you knocked up yet? When are you going to be knocked up?" And she's 27, this female doctor. And it was a fun and humor, but she realized that maybe they're not sending her to this special education program overseas, and they're maybe not offering her certain positions because they expect her to leave and have kids. And this lawyer, the friend of this doctor, conducted a survey among young medical students and doctors, and the results were shocking. I mean, it's not sociological study, so we can't really say it's like a scientific proof and so on. But as a sort of information about how it really, what's going on in the country, it is, I think it provides us with a great view of the reality. And the reality is that female medical students here from year one, they should not really plan for a big career, not in surgery or not to be, bosses of hospitals, because they will leave and have kids. So they should just give up immediately. They tell them in the first year, on the very beginning of their careers. Then they have less mentorship from older colleagues because, again, they don't think their perspective is very, very good because they will leave. When they apply for jobs, there were many examples actually when either they hear it from other people or they hear it directly from the people who interviewed them, when the people said, well, you're a perfect candidate, you're amazing, you speak all these languages and all that, but I will not give you the job. Why not? Because you're a woman. And it happened so much. And then also later in their careers, when they go to the hospitals, again, it's mentorship, it's sending helping them. There were several stories of women, I mean, especially in surgery, because so many doctors consider this very masculine kind of thing, the surgeons.
But that's what we see in the movies.
So you see in the tough. Yeah, but if you look at the Grey's Anatomy, for instance, I only watched the first season, then I thought it was a bit crap. But in the first season, you see many women operating on patients and so on. So it depends on who you look at. But for instance, so some of the doctors even describe when they come into the operating theater, the doctors say, "Oh, the chickens are here." The chickens being how you talk about women. Is, "Oh, you don't even listen. You don't need this." So they actually actively discourage them from learning and from building their careers because they will leave one day for maternity leave. And what's fascinating is they don't even care if the person actually wants to leave. It's not like they would ask someone, "So when do you plan kids?" Which, by the way, they ask a lot, and it's illegal. You can't really ask this, but I can imagine that you would maybe react if somebody says, "Yes, in a few years I want to have 5 kids and I will leave definitely." But what if there is a person who doesn't want to have kids or has, problems with infertility, doesn't even want to get married? There's so many other things. And the second part is that you, even with kids, can have a career and should have a career, as we can see in many other countries. So the fact that Czech society expects women to leave for 3 or more years to go and look after the kids, and then even when the kids are older, the woman is the primary caretaker influences so many things, from the gender pay gap to, by the way, the fact that there are so little women in the public sphere commenting things.
And they're almost in politics and public office, it's less than
so many. There's so little women in. If you turn on the TV, who's commenting the American election or who's commenting? I mean, even football. I remember, by the way, from Iceland, that I was so psyched by the fact that I turned on TV and there was a panel of people discussing football, and it was one guy and 2 women. I couldn't, why not? There are women who are interested in football. But here it's connected to the caretaking in the way that very often women just simply don't have time and energy to go to these panels, to go to conferences, to be really on top of their game, because they actually have to look after the children. And exactly as you said, even if they don't want to be at home for 3 years, they have to, because they can't find a place in preschool, and their employers they just don't want to. They don't care about their being mothers. I mean, I recently interviewed a woman who was quite ranking in one of the ministries. I can't really say who it was, but she was very important member of the team there, and she was highly valued, and won many cases for the state and all that. And she just she described how the fact that she had a baby felt like they completely lost interest in her as an employee. Mm-hmm. Even though before that she was very successful, she worked perfectly. They just thought that she was gone, instead of trying to work out how they can, help her in combining the family and the work, which is doable. You can have a little, like a preschool in the office. You can work from home sometimes, and maybe there are so many ways how to do this. But the people here, the employers, I mean, it's also changing a little bit, but they're not interested. And also there's a very strong peer pressure and very strong family pressure. So you hear from many women and men also, but especially women, when they decide to go back after 1 year, their mothers tell them,
there's something wrong with them.
There's something wrong with them.
It's shamed.
It's shamed. You're leaving your child so early. I'm not saying that, you should give birth and go immediately back to work, even though I have friends who were working day after childbirth. They had a baby. Of course, they weren't, people from like working professions, so they were lawyers and journalists. But my friend she gave birth, and she had a baby happy sleeping next to her on the bed, and she just took out laptop and wrote a contract for someone.
Yeah, my lawyer has 3 kids under 8, and she runs a law firm in Brno, and she. I never had any problem working with her. I knew that she was working from home sometimes, but
and there's the last thing, and some HR managers, even the wise ones, they tell you that mothers with small kids are in a way dream employers, because they're very efficient. Their time management is impeccable, because they learn how to combine so many things and be on time and use the space you have between, the kids sleep and whatever, napping or evening bathing or whatever, to work very efficiently. And they're good at multitasking, and very often they're so happy that someone will employ them, that they're so loyal. So in a way, they're great employees for these skills they actually develop. But somehow some employers just don't see it, and it's a problem for them.
I think I can. I mean, I hired once a 8-month pregnant woman as a marketing director of my company, and I didn't realize when I did that, but it became like an article on LinkedIn.
You didn't realize she was pregnant?
Yeah, she told me, and I said, I don't care. You just you take care of that stuff. You know what the job is. If you trust yourself to do it, then it's yours. And she was working remotely anyway, so it didn't really make any difference. And she did a great job, I had no issue with that. And I agree with you. The loyalty definitely comes there, because, in some way I think that women often can be in a position, or moms can feel in a way rejected. Some of my best recruitments over the years have been actually women coming out of maternity or in maternity. Yeah. But that's aside. I didn't want to. I just wanted to talk nicely about myself a little bit.
Yeah, come on. Humble brag. No, I think hiring an 8 months pregnant woman, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, well done you.
I needed this. But my mom came here to visit. I mean, she's been here many times to visit me, but I remember she said to me, like, we went to a traditional Czech restaurant in Vinohrady, where I used to live, and we were sitting there, me, my father and my mother, and we were eating, and they were having beers, and then my mom said, "Where are all the women?" And I had never thought about this. And then I looked around at the tables, and every table were like 3, 4, 5 guys in the pub. And I had to, well, they're at home with the kids, I said. And then I realized when I said this, how unfair this is, And I don't know, I often thought about it like if this is some sort of conspiracy against women, because all the people in power are men, and it's up to them to change the maternity regulation, to build more kindergartens, etc. So isn't it just comfy for the guys as it is?
One theory says, and I'm actually not sure if I support this, but it doesn't sound so crazy. One theory says that restrict or creating impossible and very conservative, or sort of, so to speak, traditional ideal of motherhood is the way how to keep the women, in other words, the competition away. The women now are the competition of the men. I mean, saying this doesn't mean that I, again, as the cliche says, that I put women against men and it's some war and so on. Nobody says that, but it's inevitable to see that if you have now more than half of people coming out of universities, the people who are graduating in the Czech Republic are girls. When I mention medicine, it's even 60%. They're overwhelming.
Overrepresented in the population. Yeah.
So they're educated, and then in some age groups, there are more women with higher education than men. And they prove over time, I think women, you see more and more and more examples, that they are absolutely capable of doing whatever the men can do, women can do as well. And you feel like you can see it also in some stuff where traditionally we believe that they are physically unable, and that's not saying they're weaker, but we have different bodies than you have. So that's not anti-feminism. That's just fact. Yeah. But my favorite example of this, and now we learn that it's maybe not true as well, that there are some women, of course not every woman can be a firefighter, of course not, but there are few huge women who have great strengths, and they're very brave, and they absolutely dream of being a firefighter. So why not let them do their jobs? And at the same time, there can be 50 kilograms men who are tiny and scared of whatever, and they would never be a firefighter. So why insist on certain jobs being only for men when you could have, and vice versa? They could be a great, nurse men, or they could be a great teacher is now in the Czech Republic, typically female. Fantastic teachers also, and it's great for the kids to see also men. So you can, but back to what I wanted to talk about, the physical stuff, is that there are great examples of these cliches, how they turn not to be true after the symphonic orchestras all over the world started to hire people when the commission who chooses the player doesn't actually see the players.
Who it is, yeah.
So you only hear them play. And there were some, of course, I'm afraid I don't really know the names of the instruments in English, but there are like these huge thing you blow into.
Oboe and
these things. And there's especially one which is like huge. You sort of have it around you. I don't know what it's called.
It looks like an elephant.
Yeah, it looks like an elephant coming out of your neck, and it's just crazy. And there was this, reasonable sounding belief that woman can't play this instrument simply because she has a smaller lungs, that you need a man to be able to play this. And there was this famous case with some orchestra in North America, I forgot if it was Canadian or American, where the commission was absolutely blown away by one player on this particular instrument, and they say it was the best one they have ever heard, that he or she changed the history of the instrument and all that, and hired the person immediately, and they're loving it. And to their shock, they realized it's a tiny woman. It was a tiny woman. And somehow her lungs were fine. She could play the instrument, you know. So even in the cases where there are obvious differences and nobody is denying them, you know, always somebody says that feminists deny there are differences between men and women. No, absolutely not. Of course there are differences. But we're all individuals and we have individual talents and we can have, you know, all sorts of talents.
But because on this, you know, if you take this as an example, you're talking about like ideology, more like, or let's say it's more of a social acceptance of that women and men stand equally on certain levels, and whether it being playing in an orchestra or doing certain jobs. But to fix some of those issues, do you think that we need laws? I mean, or positive discrimination? I mean, how is that discussion here?
I have to say, I mean, and it also this comes with age, that I learned to say I don't know. I think it's more actually cool than to pretend you have a strong opinion about something when you actually don't know. And I have to tell you honestly that I actually don't know. I still am forming in the opinion about the positive discrimination, because on one hand, I do see how it kills the conversation. You say positive discrimination, everyone goes, nope. It's giving job someone just because she's a woman, you know. And you can argue, of course not. I mean, those people would be idiots to hire someone it's someone qualified, but you also consider the fact that you have only blokes in your company, that you should you could use a different point of view, different life experience. Again, women are not the same as men because they have different life experience. But I do feel very strongly that, especially now when it's so polarized, the discussion, that it's maybe not a good idea to go this way and really sort of mandatory rules that you sort of imply, you know, you sort of impose on people. And at the same time, we know there are certain tools with which you can change the reality without the laws and without pushing as much. So I give you a concrete example. I interviewed a guy from Norway who focused on women in science. And he said, for instance, that a great impact had a program where the bosses of certain scientific units, which were overlooking some teams, were just simply a little bit more focused on encouraging women to apply for grants or to apply for certain positions. It's not saying you give it automatically to women. It's not saying women are better. It's just simply having in mind that women maybe have some obstacles. They believe in themselves less. They maybe heard that women shouldn't be scientists. Maybe they have 3 kids and they are sort of uncertain if they can manage to be, if they can succeed. You just keep these realities in mind, and with that you encourage them, or you more focus on saying, are you okay? Do you need more help with certain things?
So it's more support than force.
More support than force. And for example, I give you a concrete example. From my job, I work in Respekt, but also I'm in charge of one section of the magazine. So I am a sort of a boss in a way, and I try to do this also in how I manage the team. And for instance, there are some people with kids, but there is only one writer in my team who is a mother and who is a primary caretaker of the kids. And for instance, we have this situation when she came late to the meeting when we still had office. It was pre-COVID times, and she was late. And somebody said, well, she's late, and what if somebody else is late? That's unfair because you didn't say anything, or you didn't. And I said, well, I'm not going to say anything because she's late because she was driving her 2 kids to preschool. And so her situation is she's responsible for these kids and she's the primary caretaker. So it wasn't like she would have some advantages, but I had in mind her situation,
circumstances,
her circumstances. So I think maybe that's the way how to do it. So in politics, you can not the quotas, but you can. And again, of course, there are some people who absolutely don't want to help women, and then they want to support them, and they don't think the women should be in certain places. But if you feel there are not enough women in certain spaces, and you want to do something about it, there are ways how to do it without imposing laws and rules and really being, hardliner.
But but sorry, I'm just thinking because if I then what you're saying is that we need to kind of believe that a male-dominated society where the balance of power sits a lot with the men because of caretaker versus provider roles that are very kind of, let's say, conservative here versus what I know, for example, from Iceland. So we are saying, okay, we think we could change it, or it's possible to change this from the inside. Because I can see that versus then saying, no, let's change it with force, political force, and then people will learn that it actually works and it's fine. It's good to have the girls around. They contribute and they bring a different view. I guess these are the two kind of conflicting. And then I'm thinking, okay, so if I look at this society here, who is now raising those kids? It's women, and they're raising both the girls and the guys. Yeah. So are they actively doing this now? Are they encouraging their daughters to seek a career or?
Well, not everyone. And that's why I say I sometimes am quite skeptical about the whole generational gap, that young people automatically will bring something new because, the new generation will. Well, I always say, well, of course they will. But at the same time, the young generation is raised by the old generation with certain values. And you do hear stories how, men in their 20s are demanding a very conservative model from their girlfriends or wives, that they're not modern in a sense that they would think that they would have a 2-career family and who will look after the kids and so on. But at the same time, it is, so I want to say this, and the kids are not only raised by the parents, the kids are also influenced heavily by teachers in school and even in preschools. And again, you would be surprised how conservative sometimes these teachers in preschools are, and they're mostly female. And there are some, surprising stories I heard. I give you two crazy examples I heard in recent, like a year or so. So one story is about a boy who was about 4, and he loved to draw. He really liked drawing. And he came home one day and didn't want to draw. And his mother said, "Why not drawing?" He said, "I don't know." And she asked him again, and he didn't want to say why. And then it just went on for a while. And after a while, he said why he was not drawing anymore. He was not drawing anymore because the teacher in preschool told him that drawing is not for boys and it's only for girls, and he shouldn't do it because it's a girly stuff. And I say, well, hello, I would ask the teacher if all the famous painters, which, we have in history would be told this, that, you wouldn't have a 16 chapel to look at because Michelangelo would be sitting, somewhere sulking about not being able to draw. And the other story is about a girl for a change, and she was told by a preschool teacher she was obsessed with dinosaurs and she had these toys and so on. And the teacher said it was not appropriate for a girl to play with dinosaurs. That's a boy stuff. And this is not the 80s or 70s or 50s. This is like last year or year before that. So I think the kids are shaped not only by the parents, which can be very conservative in how they bring the kids, but also by the teachers in preschool, by the teachers in elementary school, and so on. But back to your questions, how people are raised their kids. It can also cause a conflict if you raise your kids differently, because if you raise your kids differently, their grandparents maybe have a different view. So they tell them something differently, or their kids hear something else from their friends because the kids are raised differently. So sometimes it's not easy to raise your kids differently than is the cultural norm in the respected country. And it could be, it could be difficult. But at the same time, I think that that is the only way to raise your kids, that giving them the freedom to be whoever they want to be without the narrow boxes of how they should be, or how the parents or the society think that how boys should behave and how girls should behave, and what they should wear. I mean, it's absurd, this whole thing that a boy cannot have, I don't know, pink T-shirt and vice versa. The girls can have, it's just. It goes to an absurd details. Like, I always say I like the historical context, saying that, wearing, velvet and pink and makeup and wigs. I mean, kings used to wear that a few hundred years ago. So if it's not manly, then, the absolute monarch of France who commanded like millions of people, and he had like 70 castles. These people's standards were not masculine enough because he wore like white stockings and makeup, and it's just absurd. It goes to these like crazy details, how these ideas, what girl is and what boy is, and how they should look and behave, and what their interests should be, and all that.
When with feminism saying that women should have an equal chance to be participating in society, in business, politics, etc., etc. Have we then kind of, let's say, reduced the expectations to them as caretakers and I don't know what they do at home? Because in some way, I often feel that when I look at women that have really pushed and gotten into being involved in everything, they also need to do all the stuff at home. So there's just more on their plate than it was. So we kind of created some idea of some superwoman that has a career, kids, cooks, bakes,
looks
cleans.
amazing, she's skinny, all that.
Yeah, all of this has to be in place. Otherwise, she's not successful.
That goes back to the conspiracy. I mean, there are even some people saying that, even the beauty ideal is a weapon against women. Because if you need to be 50 kilograms, you need to be skinny, it requires so much work and so much focus that you forget to be a world-class surgeon, because you run all the time and you're on elliptical trainer, So, but I don't believe that. But maybe it has something to do with it. But yeah, it creates these... And on the other hand, I absolutely understand that some women are tired of this because they received confusing messages. They are told they can be everything now because that's the modern world. Yeah, I always complain about the conservative views and so on, but at the same time, it's necessary to point out that we've gone so far. Absolutely, women are studying universities, women are in great numbers joining army, all that. So, and they are again. There are some conservative parents, absolutely, but many women today, even here, are raised with the notion that they can be whatever I want. They absolutely can be. Yeah, maybe a grandmother will say, "Well, you probably shouldn't join the army, darling. It's very dangerous." But if they want, I mean, there are no legal obstacles, or they actually can do. They can choose their careers, but then. And this is, by the way, why so many young women will tell you when they were in their 20s, they weren't feminists because they didn't see the point. If they didn't have experience with sexual violence, or didn't experience poverty, or didn't experience, some of the serious stuff, and they were raised up in a nice family, they were told they can do whatever they want, they were supported, they went to study at the university, they didn't see the point. They say, what is this for? I can do whatever I want, I'm respected, I'm a woman, I can be I go to medical school, all that. And very often they say it breaks it changes around the time they have kids, when they realize it's not all solved and we still have these problems. So I forgot what I was saying. So when the
reality hits, then when the reality hits, they actually realize that it's. But you're saying so if you took these French guys in the makeup and I don't know, 300-400 years ago, 100 years ago or something. But in the same way, if we look at, for example, monogamy and a lot of these things are relatively new in our culture. I mean, if you go back 200 years, then the male power he had multiple wives and girlfriends and blah, blah, blah. And it was part of the kind of the hierarchy in society to be this guy, this alpha male somehow. And, haven't we actually come, if we think about it on the timeline of humanity, haven't we come really, really far today where women are not, at least in our cultures, not the property of men anymore,
Yeah.
Thank
God.
And because, and that makes me think, okay, so is it realistic to think that a radical change will take place, or do we just have to kind of wait for the evolution?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, because it's always, I think every change that happens in society, that those people who were striving to do this change had the same question. And I think everyone who was working towards certain change got tired at some certain point of how long it takes, and maybe, exactly as you say, maybe lost the sense of how much it has changed. But it's all about balance, But it's good to have in mind how much has changed. I mean, I like to always do this test, which was inspired by this Israeli intellectual, this Harari, Noel Harari. Hope I'm not saying his...
the guy from Sapiens.
Homo sapiens, yeah. And he explains beautifully the change of women in society in comparing how woman today lives, does certain things, and how woman in old Greece would be, what she would be doing. And I can just, for a Czech context, I can take a woman I can take myself, and I can take a woman in Prague living in 1860, so to speak. So I can vote, I can be a member of political party, I can own property. When I inherit from my parents, I can inherit, I have my own money, I decided what's happening with my body. I choose the person I marry or who I date. I can join the army. I can be a judge. I can be a lawyer. I mean, it's endless. None of these things she could do. She couldn't inherit. She couldn't vote. She couldn't join, or even 100 years ago, in the year 1905, so to speak. So it's a bit of closer to us. She didn't even could, as I mentioned, the law about the family. Women actually couldn't really make any decisions about their children, their own children. The father was the one who decided everything important. And even when they got divorced, she lost the custody automatically because they just simply somehow didn't see her fit to look after her own children. The kids after a certain age went to her father automatically. So it is good to remember how much has changed. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I think it is Harari or somebody else who said and I don't want to say liberation of women because that's what the communists said, but the changes of women in society are the most amazing change in human history, in sort of social structure, the one or one of the greatest changes. If we look at it, it does only take 100 years or so, 150 years, so to speak, really full of change.
But a 25-year-old Czech girl doesn't want to wait 150 years. She doesn't have the time.
No, she doesn't have the time. And, I wanted to say one thing when we talk about the laws. I absolutely support legal changes, and you can do a lot of good by changing the laws. Definitely. You can provide all sorts of tools and you can, again, it's the support. So the law doesn't necessarily have to be positive discrimination, but it could be that every child has a right for a place in a preschool, or it could be that you don't have to leave for 3 years for a maternity leave. You can actually leave for short time, which was, by the way, the change which was adopted a few years ago, and it had a great response from women who say, thank God, I just want a shorter one, and then I want to go back to work, which again, by the way, is what I would like to also mention is that it's about the freedom of choice, and if you say that if you want to stay at home with your children for 10 years, be my guest. That I don't actually know any feminist who would say it's wrong to stay at home with your kids, but if it's your choice, if it's your choice. So going back to the legal questions, of course there are so many things you can change. We can change with the laws, and then you see how maybe the cultural norms change accordingly. When I mentioned the stalking, I think that the society really started to maybe notice stalking and maybe take it a little bit more seriously after it was the law was adopted. It's actually a crime. It's not just a thing somebody does and he's a little bit weird. No, it's actually a crime, and you can go to prison if you do this to someone. And then you see people say, "Oh well, if it's a crime, then we should consider it, serious." So you can influence cultural norms by changing the laws. Absolutely. And with the speed, there was this great scene in Mrs. America, the TV show which premiered this year, which was about feminists in the 70s in America. And there's a great scene with Gloria Steinem, which she fought for legal abortion because she had herself illegal abortion when she was young, and it was a traumatic experience, and it really shaped her views on this. And there's a fantastic scene where, again, one of the things they tried to push through and it failed, and they were all tired, and she just sat there and said, "So for how long are young women are going to be sneaking to hotels where dodgy doctors are doing some dirty, weird stuff on them? For how long do we have to wait for this change?" And well, a few years after that, the Constitutional Court adopted the changes, and the abortion was legal. So I think it's always a struggle that some people want the change quickly. Some people don't want the change at all. Some people realize that social change takes years, sometimes decades. Some people don't accept it. Some people want the change to become faster, and then they become frustrated. It's all. I don't really have an answer to this. No. But if you said the 25-year-old girl, I would say this: if there is one, if it would be just one 25-year-old young doctor who absolutely dreams to be a surgeon, and she watched Grey's Anatomy and she wants to be Meredith Grey and operate on people, and some person tells her that she's worthless and she shouldn't be a doctor and shouldn't be a surgeon because she's just a walking womb for babies. That for her, the change is, not quick enough. The change should be tomorrow, because she should work immediately on her career. If she wants to be the surgeon, she should be trained and she should be mentored and all that. And we can all benefit from that. If someone this guy who will say women should be surgeons or women shouldn't be doctors, what if he's in a car accident or he has a sick heart or whatever, and this woman he denies the right to fulfill her dreams and talents, will be the one who will save him in the operating theater. So now I sound a bit like the dreamer, but you know what I mean. You never know when you will, or who shall become a scientist who will discover
the cure for cancer.
The cure for cancer or for COVID. The Pfizer vaccine, which was developed by the Turkish-German scientists. It's men and women. It's a couple. So there's a woman involved in the vaccine. So yeah.
It's a topic that is kind of related to feminism, which is the Me Too thingy that came out 3 years ago.
2017.
Yeah, and it was, for me, looking at it, it was good in some way, and then I could also see some dark sides to it, and obviously to shed a light into where people are abusing power and taking advantage of their position towards someone else is always going to be wrong. But then I was thinking, well, don't we have the legal system to deal with this? And do we need a hashtag to deal with this kind of things? Or is Me Too actually, is that a judgment over that our system has failed?
That's a great question. I think the Me Too is a product of frustration with the legal system. Because very often you hear Me Too is mostly women who didn't speak up when it was happening, and now they remember something happened 20 years ago. That's the cliche. But very often, if you look into it, I mean, if you look at the guy with which it started, which is Weinstein, people did speak up. Women spoke up for decades. Therefore, many people around him actually knew about it. His, colleagues from the firm. And the system failed them. And by the system, I mean all sorts of parts of the system, being the immediate firm the person is from, but also the legal system, police, and the prosecutors. And you see so many cases where the police didn't act accordingly, the prosecutors didn't act accordingly. There were the women tried to do something. There were some lawyers who told them, you shouldn't report this because you will never win this, because such and such person is very rich and he will destroy you, which, by the way, was an unfair assumption, because if you're, with Weinstein, the focus is a lot on the actresses, but there were so many young assistants from the firm. And these are stories. It's a 21-year-old graduate from university. It's her first job. And in her first or second week, she's harassed by Weinstein, who at the time is the boss of Hollywood, is the mega producer with millions and millions. So the balance of power is so great that, of course, she's not going to sue him. Of course, even if she would report it to the police, he will charge there with 10 lawyers, each of them the top of their game, and he's out in 5 minutes. So he's not now out. He is in prison now. But that's what the women were thinking. So the system, of course, not always failed. The system works and it's improved over time. But I think the Me Too was to great extent, and then you saw the frustration also, the people who joined the hashtag. Then many of the cases where I told about the fact I was harassed. I give you a concrete example. I spoke to a young woman who said she was harassed badly in the public space by some men, and she came home and told her then boyfriend. And he first laughed, and then he said she was hysterical, and why is she saying such nonsense, and he's sure it didn't happen. And she described how hugely hurt she was by this reaction, and how, well, eventually they broke up and so on. So if we talk about system failing the victims, it's not only the police, but it's also society in a greater sense. That one therapist actually told me, and there are also some studies, that majority of rape victims are not believed by at least one person in their immediate circle, either their family or their friends or some colleagues or someone. So the victims experience, they're not believed, they're not heard, nothing is done against the perpetrators, and it happens partly because there are objective reasons. I mean, these crimes, very often they don't have witnesses, it's only two people there. There are often alcohol involved, they're sort of blurred. I mean, some of them are clear, obviously. 60-year-old producer, 21-year-old assistant, it's in the office, she doesn't want to do it, she says no, he goes on. I mean, but again, no witnesses. Maybe she's drinking. Maybe she smoked some pot when she was 17. And all this is...
to discredit her.
To discredit her is absolutely used, So...
Yeah, but these are cases where I can Sorry,
Sure.
yeah, this is where I can say, okay, I can see the purpose of this, and I can see that this serves a good purpose, because in the end, yeah, it's stronger than the system that otherwise would fail her. But on the other hand, I also have seen cases where Me Too was kind of covering, let's say, something that I would just say hitting on someone in a bar, or complimenting someone in the office, and ended up with the person being fired for what he or she did.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, okay, so well,
The proportion
yeah,
of it.
and also, like, when if I meet the girl in a bar and I flirt with her, if she likes me, she will accept me somehow. She will indicate back that she likes me. If she doesn't like me, do I then risk being accused of sexual harassment because I'm ugly, or I'm not attracted to her, or whatever it is, or or I'm too fat, or whatever? So if that then makes me a potential threat for me to be called out on a hashtag and named, and risk then losing my job, reputation, whatever, blah blah blah, that's not really fair.
I know this is a horrible cliche, but I use it so often, and I just believe it so much, that context is everything. So to answer your concern, we would always have to look into the concrete situation, what actually happened. What was the relationship those people in? And if I take the example of you hitting at someone in the bar, there's hitting at someone and hitting at someone. There is perfectly okay hitting and someone would say, hey, what's up? I don't know,
How are you?
How are you?
Do you come here often?
Yeah, very original. Every woman just flies immediately after this to your...
Never fails.
To your embrace. But there is also, I don't know, putting your hand in her, under her skirt.
Yeah.
Without even... I'm not saying that you should introduce yourself and then without even introducing yourself, or being vulgar, or again, I can give you a concrete example from my experience. I was sitting in a cafe. It was like 2 years ago, and I was reading a book. I was there on my own, and then all of a sudden the waiter came with a shot of some rum or something. I said, I didn't order that. And said, those guys sitting over there, order it for you. I said, okay, thank you. So I wave at them. And then nothing happened. I thought that if you do this, then the next step is you come over and you say something. Nothing happened.
Do you come here often?
Do you come here often? How do you like the rum? And so I drank the rum. I didn't pay for it because they already paid for it. And I had to be somewhere else. So I just stood up and leave. And then on the way there and say, thank you guys. It was a nice compliment. And they wanted to have some interaction with me. Fine. So introduce themselves. And one of them, as he was introducing, by the way, they were both quite drunk at the time. And he sort of really violently pulled me towards him and started to kiss me. And I just didn't, I don't kiss people when I see them
For
1
the first
minute.
time,
Yeah, first time I actually meet them. And I said, well, what are you doing? And I sort of pulled away. And he started yelling at me, you bitch, you ungrateful bitch. And I said, do you really think that I'm going to kiss you because you ordered a shot of rum for me? Is this how you think things work? They don't work like this. That's not how you hit on a girl in a bar. Maybe on some of them, some women would be fine with it if there would be maybe some attraction, but some of them wouldn't. And so I think it very much I don't think there is, people ask me with the Me Too, so what is the line in the sand, or what are the rules?
Yeah, what are the rules?
And you know what the problem is? The rules are created by every individual. That's the problem. Of course, there are clear rules on violence and, shouting at someone or touching their privates, if it's a stranger, or attacking a minor. That's clear. That's a criminal territory. But when it comes to flirting and seducing and just connecting with people, everyone is different. And for everyone, different things are acceptable and unacceptable. And I fully realized that this makes it very confusing, very confusing. And what also is very confusing is maybe traditionally women didn't speak up as much about what they like and didn't like, you know. So maybe, I don't know, a few years ago, women would be very uncomfortable, but they would be like sort of smiling awkwardly and they wouldn't say anything. But maybe now some younger women are very, very clear about, you know, don't do this, I don't like this, I like that, I want that, I don't want that. And I always have this metaphor when I'm trying to explain this, that I have a metaphor. You know, I always ask the people, because people are always asking me, so how do I know what I can do if certain things is acceptable for certain person? For girl A, she's completely fine with it. But then I meet another girl and she doesn't like it. So how do I exist in this? How do I operate in this world? And I always say, well, what do you do if you ask someone to come to your home and cook them dinner? What do you ask? So do you ask, what do you like for food? So I'm making steaks. Are you okay with it? And the person says, no, I'm a vegetarian. And you don't shout at them for not liking steak. I mean, maybe some people will. But you say, okay. And
if
you
it's
make
a weekend, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. But you make them grilled cheese, you know. Does it mean that steaks are bad food? No. People love great steaks, but not everyone. Someone is vegetarian, somebody is even vegan. And maybe if you have great steaks a lot this month, maybe next month you want to have a break and eat something else. I just want to say this, that individual preferences in things are respected in so many areas that it should be respected in such an important area such as dating and even in sex, that everyone is different, everyone has different preferences and everyone is different. So if you ask about specifically what you said about the hitting the girl, just I don't know, ask, or I always watch the reactions. I mean, again with the steak, I mean, I think I would probably notice, I would understand the reaction on the face of a vegetarian if I would cook him a bloody steak, and he would probably doesn't look like he's not going to eat it. I'll say, okay, what can I cook? What else can I cook you? But I'm not actually. I realize I'm not answering your question. You're asking if someone you do will be then reflected on as a problematic. And I think this is something we should also keep in mind, that everyone, and again, it shouldn't be, I'm not talking about criminal behavior or really like repulsive behavior, but simply just maybe not the most skilled flirting, that we should just, the first round should be sort of off the table. They should be allowed to be a bit silly or maybe had a bad humor. And then if you express that you don't like it and the person still continues, then the problem starts, I think. I think the first approach, if you're not committing crime, again, if you're not committing something, if you're not really crossing the lines, then it shouldn't be considered problematic. It should be maybe problematic after someone expresses, say they don't want to talk to you, or
this
leave. Is,
I want to be alone, or
I'm going to be alone. And if you keep insisting, and then maybe another hour, that's another problem. And then if you follow, and if the person follows the other, well, and that's another story. It's always, I always say, it's always about the context. You don't have two situations which are similar. It's always about the context.
But it's tricky, because I remember, for example, when because I mean, I think everybody can agree about this when it's about violence, or you're insisting, you don't respect the limits that the other person is setting up. I think everybody can agree to that, and a person who doesn't agree to that has some bigger issues in their lives. But some of the cases that came out in this and have been coming out has been about like, my boss harassed me. He told me that I was wearing a nice dress. And when I saw this, I was like, shit, I said this so many times to women working around me, and I had no intention with it. I would just actually liked it to tell them if they had a nice dress or your hair is cool or something like that. And I still do it, and I will always do it. But of course, I started thinking when this was going on, I was like, Jesus Christ, am I risking to be called out somehow? And I felt that what happened was that we kind of built an unofficial justice system that was based on social media. And if you were, let's say, if I was a professor in a university and then somebody said, well, this guy, he is 50 and he complimented this 20-year-old girl on her hair, and that's really inappropriate, and then it would kind of escalate, and he would be, people would share it, and blah. He lost the job, and I'm like, nah, that's not, this is not right, you know?
Well, I think there people. I don't think that when it's called campaign, it's appropriate. It's not a campaign because campaign suggests it's organized by someone. That someone had an idea, then it organized it. There were some rules. There are no rules. It's a viral movement. Therefore, everybody can join, and there are no rules to how to communicate it, what to post, where, who to name, and so on. And I absolutely agree that's the problematic part of Me Too, the whole viral part. When you look into the part which is the
but it's also the fuel of the movement.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, there were some problematic cases there. But for so many women, I mean, I wrote about it several times, and I always got so many responses that for so many women, this was a very important platform where they shared their experience. They didn't name anyone. For instance, in the Czech Republic, when you look at it, nobody named anyone. It was just all, this happened to me, that happened to me, but it was not names like in States or in Britain. They just described what happened to them. And some of them even, I wrote about several women, they used the hashtag and they just said, Me Too. I'm not going to say what.
Yeah.
I just want to join this.
Yeah.
And so many women told me how liberating it was for them. How
to let it out.
To let it out, first of all. And secondly, how they felt they're not alone, because people after this, after rape, after assault, after even harassment, is very uncomfortable. I mean, even after that incident we talked about on the beginning, I joke about it, but I was deeply shaking. My hands were shaking, and I felt very. Of course, he hit me. There was a sort of a physical attack. But when you're harassed, when you're harassed in public spaces and so on, it's really like openly sexual, vulgar. You really feel sort of weird. You just think, and many people tell you, what's wrong with you? How did you provoke him? So many women with this experience feel that they're the weird ones, that everyone else is normal and this only happens to them. And what Me Too changed was this feeling that they're alone in it, and they felt relieved that there are so many people who actually experience something. And I can tell you, I always say this at the debates, I literally do not know a woman who wouldn't have such experience. Literally. I always do this check. If some of my girlfriends, my mother, my colleagues, someone I interviewed, and somebody has 15 incidents, somebody has violence, somebody has this, somebody has just one crazy guy, shouting at the street, and it wasn't really dangerous. So it varies greatly, but almost so many women share this experience. And what you're asking is, of course, the second very important part of it, and it's really important. What happens? How does this affect men? And when you mentioned some stories which were problematic, I think it was inevitable that it will somehow go to some extreme or
some collateral damage.
Yeah, it's always with every movement. Crazy people join in, people who don't understand what it actually means. People who use it as a tool against someone. Absolutely, it can happen, as a weapon against someone. And then what should happen is that people who decide about their, specific individual's career should look at the situation and should not succumb to the pressure. and they should, do we actually consider this, stepping over the line, or is it some kind of mistake? The person apologized, it was just once. Again, it varies. You can have situation when somebody is inappropriate for 10 years and is arrogant and say those cows are reporting me, I didn't do anything wrong. And then you have someone, just even thinking about, is this appropriate, or should I, that means that you think about the people and the consequences. And I wouldn't want decent men to be scared. I want men who do this to be scared from the changes of the times. But I absolutely don't want normal men to be uncertain and scared. And I do see that this is one of the consequences of the movement, and it pains me because it comes from maybe a bit, I don't know, misunderstanding why it was what it was for, and
But I guess, like you're saying, I mean, we will learn to use this somehow. Like everything else that is a radical change, somehow it kind of finds a balance somewhere.
Yeah.
And
it can backfire.
Or creates a new balance or something like that, but talking about, because I mean, I think this was a very, how do you say, Me Too was, I would say, a very kind of actual touch point between males and feminism in a way, because I think that men experienced themselves more on the end of being accused of something than women were, and that this was kind of one of the shapes or faces of feminism in some way. And then I'm wondering now, like we've had feminism for years, and it's an ongoing movement. It's not like a 3 months project and then it's finished. It's an eternal thing somehow, and will be. And how are men? Are they involved in this? I mean, like here in the Czech Republic, do you see men and kind of stepping into the feminist movement and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are several men who are really sort of faces of feminism, and they are really important in the sense that some of them are what you would call some traditional masculine ideal, So I know one of them, my former colleague, he's a film critic. He's called Kamil Fila, and he weights lifts, and he's a big guy, really, really muscly guy. And another one I would mention is Pavel Houdek. He's a lawyer and self-defense instructor, and he's in great shape. And I'm saying this. I mean, this sounds maybe a bit
stereotypical.
Weird. Stereotypical masculine and all that. But I think it's important. I'm aware of all that. But I think it's really important. So I think it's important that these men step up to the plate and talk openly about why this is important, because. Even if when we like it or not, sometimes you see that if it comes from a man, it's taking more seriously, and it's maybe people listen a bit more than when it's just a crazy woman, talking about
crazy hairy woman.
Yeah, exactly, crazy hairy woman. Just shouting nonstop about somebody. I mean, I am even making fun of in the office. And I'm making the fun of myself, It's like that they just that Silvie is on the watch for women who have been wronged and ready to fight for them. But so it's like it's part of humor. But what I mean by this is that you need that maybe the general public needs to see that it's not hairy monsters who hate men. It's just people from all sorts of parts of life who understand the society and maybe also they bring it up also for the men, because again we talked about women, and maybe we mentioned men regarding Me Too, but feminism focuses on men a lot because they also are not many men are not comfortable in the system. Many men are not comfortable in being raised in the fact that they shouldn't show any emotions and they should be tough and what the proper men should do, and they should provide and they shouldn't be weak, and it has I wrote about it also several times that men commit more suicides, men have bigger problem with substance abuse, that there's so many with various sickness. They're sick more in some way than women. That they also face, and many men are unhappy in the model, the prevailing family model. They want they don't want a cleaner and a nanny for their kids. They just want a partner.
Yeah.
And they want their way of life to be accepted by the society. So I think it's also about men, and it, again, just to be more optimistic and on a positive note, you see more and more men speaking publicly, and that's great. And it also requires some kind of being a bit brave, because again, there's the they're called the B males and all this nonsense, that they just want to be liked by the women, so they claim they're feminists and all that. But no, it's men absolutely should be part of the conversation, because I say that there are no, there's always the women's issue. There's no women's issue. Everything is also men's issue.
Yeah.
Even
it's issue of society, not just.
I mean, children also. I mean, there is no immaculate conception unless your child was created in immaculate conception. The child has a father, so childcare is also issue for men. Everything, and the men are influenced by this, not only by when they have daughters, and they realize also this is very interesting, that men realize certain things when they have daughters. They see how their little girls are maybe treated differently and all that, and they fear that they will be victims of some bad things, and that they all of a sudden they see why it's still needed to be discussed, these topics. So,
but just to dampen the positivity here a little bit, Silvie, then I actually read today about a study in the U.S. where men were asked what traits they were looking for in their partner, female partner, and none of them, on top 5 was not independence, but all of them were asked, what traits do you want your daughter to have? They all mentioned independence as number 1. So it's interesting that in some way men, maybe we are just not secure enough in our own skin, that we still need someone to depend on us, and or it's our nature, or how our DNA is coded. But we would like our daughters to avoid assholes like us, so we want her to be independent,
Yeah, but then who are the partners of these independent daughters? If
there will be no one. They will not be alone. Yeah,
they will be just alone with the cat in the flat.
That's another feminist stereotype.
That's such a stereotype, and I have to say, until recently, I had 2 cats, so I was completely fulfilling these, and I love them too. Very much, but they both died recently, so it was very sad. Yeah, but absolutely. And you see this also, in how sometimes men view differently their partners and some other women. And of course, I very much appreciate when men realize certain things when they have daughters. But I have to say, there is this contra argument that some feminists made, that says, so men need to understand this because of their daughters. They can't relate to every woman that walks around, and their mother, their partner, they have the daughters with. So, and those are very close women you have in your life. So, do you really need daughters? But for me personally, that's a bit, overcomplicating things. I mean, okay, fine. They realized it because they had daughters. They see it. They think it's important. They talk about it. Great. Let's support them. So.
Yeah. Let's not because it came from the wrong area. Let's not kill it.
Yeah. Let's not bitch about everything. Let's not. Let's just be sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is in some way feminism has become a product. I mean it, and I'm thinking, does that weaken the, let's say, the power of it, or kind of dampen the effect that it has? Because you can see that it's it's being used in very much in commercial purposes and stuff like that. How does that affect?
I think I think it's a time for another. I don't know.
2 hours. Okay. Do you have the 20-second?
Sorry.
Is it a product? Is feminism a product?
I don't. I'm not. I don't have a strong opinion about this because on one hand, absolutely, it can lead to sort of the idea being sort of empty and just abused for commercial purposes. But then on the other hand, I think, what if there is a 12-year-old girl and she buys a T-shirt in H&M which says everybody should be a feminist, and she Googles it and she finds that book of the same title and she reads it, which is a great book, or she reads something about Wikipedia or else, and she realizes, oh, this is interesting, maybe what is this about? So it does promote maybe certain ideas.
Yeah, so it kind of keeps the concept in.
Yeah. So I'm a bit torn. I don't actually know. I'm not sure if it helps or if it damages.
It out. Yeah.
But I don't know if it. It could be if it's the way for you to discover certain things for certain. Of course, not everyone. I mean, somebody will buy it just because a influencer on Instagram has it and she just wears it and doesn't really care about anything. But some people, it can be a sort of tool to bring certain maybe points or terms to certain people who could be maybe interested more. But again,
the visibility is basically increased.
Yeah.
Okay, so Silvie, you are kind of as I said earlier, the poster girl of feminism here, and very much visible in the media. And I mean,
lucky me.
Yeah, I don't speak Czech, but I can see that sometimes I can see that when you communicate or how do you say, express your opinion on something, you get a lot of feedback and not all of it good. And sometimes I think, Jesus Christ, why does she keep doing it? Mm-hmm. So why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I keep asking that myself sometimes. Because I just simply think it's important. I feel like if you're drawn towards something despite it being unpleasant, or the consequences of the activity you do are unpleasant, which exactly as you said very often are, and they absolutely are. And I am sometimes, I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this because I'm always torn if I should speak about it openly, because then you show the people that you're vulnerable. But I am sometimes really, really hurt by the comments, especially that I hate men, that I just hate everyone, that I want to change the society so everybody is unhappy, and that some very personal things, that I'm fat and ugly and unlovable and unfuckable. Now the swearing comes in, or the opposite, that maybe I'm pretty, but I'm completely stupid. I'm so stupid that only stupid person could write this, and I am, sexually provocative. So that's why everyone always, that I have these weird experiences, and people discuss what you wear, your hair, your makeup, everything, just everything about you personally. And that's very unpleasant, I have to say. And especially to be to witness it or be a target of it for a long time, for years. But at the same time, I hate to be, whining about it, because I chose this voluntarily. I stay on this path, as you mentioned. I do it. I come back to it, and the reason for it is that I just simply find it important, And again, I can sound like a dreamer, but it is on an emotional level. It absolutely breaks my heart to hear that some young woman who dreams to be a doctor, as I said, you can have different stories, or some little girl who loved chemistry and she wants to be a scientist and she does all that, and then she comes to the school and they tell her that women shouldn't be scientists, or some idiot tells her that she should only because she will have kids. She should not really focus on such and such project she's passionate about. I just hate to see people's talents and passions and dreams just be like crushed by these comments. And and very often people say, oh, it's just a comment, but it's not. If you hear it on daily basis, if you hear it from your family, if you hear it from authorities or your role models, if you hear it from people who are important to you and you respect them, it can crush you and it can discourage you. And of course, many people, it doesn't discourage them and they're really strong-headed and they just want to do it. But many people are. And I keep remembering that there are people like this and people who are struggling maybe with this, or that there are concrete consequences of the situation that's still unfair towards women. And if you hear, fortunately, and to balance it, I have a negative feedback, but also have tons and tons of positive feedback. And the greatest kind, really, when people tell you, I changed my mind, you changed my mind. I see the problem. I didn't think it existed, and I read your articles, I see the problem. Or I thought, this is my greatest one, and I really, really mentioned it. There's one guy wrote to me that he saw me mentioned on the social media, and he saw some of my comments, maybe which was a bit aggressive, some of them. And based on this, he really created this idea that I am this, aggressive woman who hates men and all that. And he really believed it. And then he somehow came across some of my articles, and then he ended up digging and reading some of my other articles. Again, this is a humble brag, but we have the sort of countdown on our website, and I wrote about 1,600 articles for Respekt. So it's a lot. And he wrote many, many of them. And then he wrote to me like a great message on Messenger and said, I want to apologize to you. I really believed what I heard about you. And then I read your work, and your stuff is balanced. It's not, it's not crazy emotional. Let's do this, let's do that. It's proper reporting. You cover other things. You're not one-dimensional. All that. And this was really made my day, because that means that someone really
saw the light
and took their time. And I said, thank you so much. I mean, don't apologize. I didn't know you thought I was a crazy bitch, but thank you. So the feedback is, or people quote your stuff in their books, or you inspire someone to create something, some exhibition or whatever. But mostly I feel like I just do it because I feel it can improve people's lives. I know this sounds so but stupid,
it's like Havel with his dreams. These are your dreams.
Yeah, and I again can give you a concrete example. I recently wrote about abortion, not the I don't know how what's the difference in English, that miscarriage and abortion. So I wrote about miscarriage. So it's something you don't plan. It happens very early on the pregnancy, and so on. And I wrote a really long article about it, and I received so many reactions from women and men, because if you lose a child as a future father, you're sad. You lose a child. You also, and then you care for your wife, because she's also sad. You're nervous about her health, if she will be able to get pregnant again. All that. It's a great drama for everyone there. And I received so many reactions saying, thank you that you wrote it, that we, again, didn't feel like weirdos, that so many people experienced it, so many people were crushed by it, were absolutely devastated by the experience. And when they read an article saying it's normal to be devastated, it's normal to be sad, but at the same time, it's normal also to experience, because it happens a lot. So don't feel like a weirdo. It happens. It's very sad, but it happened to many people before. And there is a hope at the end of the tunnel, saying many, many women who had a miscarriage also had just perfectly healthy children. So this kind of feedback, that you feel that your work actually has an impact on people. Or if you write about, some woman who is exceptional in something, and somebody says, "Oh, I didn't know
an
women."
Inspiration.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know women can do this. Or an inspiration. And maybe there's a little girl who's growing up somewhere, I don't know where, and she has a dream and wants to be this, and then she sees in a magazine a portrait of a female boxer or a scientist or whatever. Say, okay, I can be this, you know.
Yeah.
So it has so many
angles to it.
yeah, so many versions of what you can actually do, and there is a positive impact. So this keeps me going. And at the same time, also sometimes somebody tells you something that you can just sort of say, okay, that's very nice. When they say, well, you know, only really people who are strong in something create or inspire this much strong reaction. It means that you do. If it's such a strong reaction, it means that you actually
You're doing something right.
You're doing something right, you know. Which I'm not sure if it's true, but you also sometimes want people not to just, polarize them. You want them to come together and see it, But
the extremes have to be in both directions, because then we can find the balance somewhere in the middle, I guess. I mean, and then somebody has to. I mean, when I look at feminism in different forms, and I mean, there are a lot of flaws to this, but there are flaws to everything, every philosophy, every movement. You can always find something where you can poke at it and say that there is something wrong. But someone has to keep the discussion going. But maybe now I'm thinking, okay, if you could give advice to, let's say, the stakeholders, parents, kids, teachers, grandparents, company leaders, how can they, I don't know, be more feminist,
I think this is, again, it's potential. There's a danger that I will sound like it's a cliche, but and it's not always doable. I am very aware of that, but see everyone as an individual is the best advice I can give. See them for who they are, not as you think they should be based on how you were raised to believe that men and women should behave, should aspire, should have emotions, should just generally exist in the world. And again, as I said, I am fully aware that sometimes it's not doable. I don't know, if you're a teacher and you have a class full of kids, it's a difficult job, of course. Yeah. But maybe when I mentioned, maybe don't tell 4-year-old boys that drawing is for girls. What harm does it do if a boy is drawing? It's harmless. It's completely harmless, and he could be a future fashion designer. He could be a future painter. He could be someone amazing. And just don't always just. And of course, unless it's behavior that is harmful to others, let these. And of course, you have to raise them and teach them manners and all that. Of course, there are some limits, but respect people as individuals with their individual talents and dreams and choices they want to make, which can be completely in the not compatible with the gender assumptions.
But. When I listen to you here, I wonder, okay, so what if I meet you in 15 years? Where will you be then? Will you still be doing the same, or will you be in politics, or will you be writing books?
I don't know. Well, I'll still be working with the pension system, going to, where, not doing well. So I will still be working. I have to say that, regarding the current situation about media, I'm not sure if there will be even some media, because the whole journalism is in long-term crisis, and people read less and less, and some of them are not willing to pay for information, even though you try to explain to them that you wouldn't expect to have free food at the supermarket or free whatever jacket at H&M. Yet, however, they expect to have product of very hard work, which costs money because you have to go somewhere, you have to take pictures of the people, all that. you go to the library, all that, to be free. And that's a danger to my job and my colleagues' jobs. So I don't know if in 15 years.
Back
and
to the glue.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be like an elderly glue lady, a little bit drier
High,
and
a little bit high.
not so plump, and maybe a bit high. I wouldn't mind that. Yeah, that would be looking towards the pension, which will be miserable. So I don't know. I'll leave it all open. I have to say that sometimes when I'm really tired, I can't really imagine I would be doing this in 15 years because it
takes a lot.
It takes a lot.
Yeah.
It takes a lot. But I don't know. But some people say, I should go to politics. I don't see myself in politics because I find it too dreadful to just respect the party lines. I mean, because I'm spoiled, I'm spoiled from Respekt. I mean, the creative freedom we have there. Yeah. I mean, of course, it has limits, but there are a few of these limits. You are respected as an author. You can choose your own topics most of the time. You just, even though actually today we had this discussion with the editor-in-chief that when he didn't agree with some part of some article, but he left it there. He said, no, this is this author opinion, and then
and
he
this
left
you
it
wouldn't
there.
be allowed to do in politics.
Yeah. And you wouldn't be able to do this in politics unless you are, of course, some
king of the world.
Unless I would be some crazy lady boss of a party when everybody
Dictator.
does what I say.
Silvie the dictator.
Yeah, but so I don't know.
No.
I don't know where I'll be. Where do you think you're going to be?
Me? I don't know. I'll probably not be a very successful podcaster because we are very close to approaching the 3
Kanye
hours.
West time.
Kanye West time, 3 hours. But no, I don't know. Anyway, so what if people want to know more about you or follow you or something? Do you have any? I mean, they can read Respekt.
Please do Respekt, subscribe. It's the best. We have audio version. You can drive or you can wash the dishes and listen to our articles or you can go for a run. And we have also podcast. We have a great podcast and we are everywhere on social media. And me personally, I'm on Facebook under my name and I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter.
Okay.
I decided to rebel a little bit against this dictatorship of social media because, again, it's a bit crazy there in a good way and in a bad way.
Takes a lot of time.
Yeah, a lot of time, a lot of energy.
A lot of frustrations.
Sometimes frustrations. But at the same time, it's a great journalistic tool. I mean, everything I need, every type of person for a text with all sorts of experience, I find through social media. I just say, please, everyone, do you know someone who speaks, I don't know, Mandarin and specializes in medicine law? And in 10 minutes, you have 5 people.
I
who
didn't
actually,
even know that person exists.
I just made it up right now, but I'm sure, I'll test it tonight. I'll see.
But so that's Silvie Lauder, Lauder.
Exactly.
And Silvie as a Silvie.
Exactly.
So that's great. And you're writing a book.
I'm writing a book, yes.
When does it come out? And it's about feminism.
It's about feminism. It's about, in Americans, how they say you should have an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
So you should introduce something in, 20 seconds or 30 seconds. So my elevator pitch for my book is, it's a book for people who say, what the hell is this feminism still about? Aren't they happy that they have a right to vote? What are these crazy women still talk about? The answer is this book. It explains you where we are actually at the moment.
And where we need to go.
Where we need to go, yeah. But it goes to a great details to explain various topics from work to carrying childcare, gender pay gap, violence, all sorts of things. I focus on Czech reality, but also have one chapter about the global reality because that's also important. There are so many ongoing topics regarding women globally that are still important. So it'll be. I mean, it's definitely not going to be like a scientific book for advanced feminists. It's more, the plan is to, actually those people who say, feminism is really just horrible and to break the hairy man-hater myth that show that it actually has a merit, and it makes sense, and it is necessary because, and the book follows.
And when is it coming?
I don't have a date yet because I have to finish it writing. I have around a bit, I would say like half of it already written. So I would say we're now completely overwhelmed with COVID and other things, but so I don't have much time to work on it. But next year definitely not, but maybe year after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. Other than that, guys, you can follow my show on Facebook. It's called The Bunker. How the hell did you end up here? Just in case you were wondering what you listened to. And congratulations to everyone who is listening right now to the end. And I want to personally thank you for being able to spend so much time with my ideas and thoughts. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you. You're welcome. I was happy to have you. I have... thanks to the sponsors. I am also now available I'm on Spotify, Google, Apple, and Podbean, and now I'm available on something called Pardus.is, which is for Icelandic speakers. So that's an Icelandic podcast page hosting some really cool podcasts. And I think I don't remember what I was going to say more. Probably nothing. No. So that's cool. See you guys around. Thanks, Silvie. Have a nice evening. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.